Kate Jackson has finally broken her silence. At 75, the angel who always carried the reputation of being the smart one has admitted what really happened the year Farrah Fawcett walked away from Charlie's Angels. It was the exit that stunned Hollywood, one that fans never fully understood. To the world, Farrah seemed to have it all. She was the face on every poster, the woman whose smile defined 1976, the star who could have ruled television for years. Yet behind the flawless image was a woman unraveling, pulled between a grueling production schedule, a crumbling marriage, and pressures that no one outside the set could see. Kate Jackson was there. She saw it all, and she remembers the moment Farrah confessed she couldn't go on. So why did Farrah really leave at the height of her fame? What truth has Kate Jackson carried for nearly 5 decades? And why, even now, does her admission change everything we thought we knew about the Angels? When Charlie's Angels premiered in the autumn of 1976, nobody expected it to become a cultural earthquake. The concept was light, even campy. 3 women, beautiful and resourceful, solving crimes under the guidance of an unseen boss named Charlie. But within weeks, it was the only show anyone was talking about. ABC had a phenomenon on its hands, and the 3 leads, Kate Jackson, Farrah Fawcett, and Jaclyn Smith, were catapulted from working actresses into overnight icons. Kate Jackson was already respected in the industry, having come off The Rookies. She was the one who gave the show its backbone, grounding the storylines with a mixture of wit and steel. Farrah Fawcett, on the other hand, was the instant star, the blonde with the dazzling smile, whose red swimsuit poster became the best-selling pinup of all time. Together with Jaclyn Smith, the trio struck a balance that felt almost alchemical. Fans didn't just watch the Angels, they worshipped them. The ratings told the story. By the winter of that first season, Charlie's Angels was one of the most watched shows in the country, pulling in audiences that rivaled even All in the Family. Every Thursday night, millions of households gathered around their televisions to see the Angels chase down villains in glamorous outfits, their hair perfectly styled, even in the midst of chaos. It was escapism, and it worked. Yet even as the show was becoming a juggernaut, something was stirring beneath the surface. Kate Jackson has admitted that success came at a price none of them anticipated. The schedule was relentless, 12 to 14 hours a day on set, 6 days a week, followed by endless promotional shoots, interviews and appearances. The Angels were expected not just to act, but to embody an ideal 24 hours a day. For Jackson, who was pragmatic by nature, it was grueling. For Farrah, whose image was being stretched in every direction, it was suffocating. The irony was painful. The show celebrated independence and power for women on screen, but behind the scenes, the 3 actresses had little control over their own time or choices. Every move was dictated by producers, agents, and network executives who saw the Angels less as individuals and more as a product. Jackson later reflected that while the audience saw glamour, the women themselves felt trapped in a machine they couldn't slow down. Farrah, in particular, bore the heaviest weight. She was suddenly everywhere, on magazine covers, in commercials, in gossip columns. Her smile sold millions of posters. Her hair sparked imitations across the country, and her role on Charlie's Angels became a symbol of the new television age. Yet the very fame that made her the face of the show also made her the most vulnerable. She could barely walk down a street without being mobbed. The spotlight was blinding, and it was relentless. Kate Jackson, who shared dressing rooms and late-night conversations with Farrah, saw the cracks forming. She would later admit that even during that first season, Farrah began to question whether the show was worth the personal cost. The Angels may have been conquering television, but behind closed doors, Farrah was restless. She longed for freedom, for film roles, for a chance to be something more than a poster on a teenager's wall. And that raised the question Kate Jackson couldn't ignore. If Charlie's Angels was the dream job everyone envied, Why did Farrah Fawcett feel like she was living in a cage? Behind the glamour and the glossy magazine spreads was a reality most viewers never saw: the contracts that bound the angels to the show. Kate Jackson has often said that those contracts were both the foundation of the phenomenon and the chain that quietly suffocated them. On paper, the deals seemed straightforward. 3 actresses, steady work, weekly paychecks. But in truth, the network and producers held nearly all the power. Each of the angels signed agreements that locked them into long shooting days and left little room for outside projects. For Kate Jackson, who had already built credibility with the rookies, this was frustrating but manageable. For Farrah Fawcett, it quickly became unbearable. She was suddenly one of the most famous women in America, yet she had almost no freedom to pursue opportunities that came rushing her way. Film directors wanted her, advertisers courted her, but the contract said no. Jackson has admitted that Farrah struggled most with the restrictions. Unlike Jaclyn Smith, who found stability within the system, Farrah was being pulled in 2 directions at once. On the one hand, ABC wanted her to remain the golden face of Charlie's Angels, to keep the ratings high, to keep the franchise alive. On the other hand, Farrah herself was restless, desperate to try film, eager to prove she could be more than a television beauty. Every no she heard from the network chipped away at her spirit. It wasn't just about work opportunities. The money was another fracture. Despite the show's blockbuster success, the salaries of the 3 leads were shockingly low compared to what male stars on other networks were earning. Kate Jackson was particularly vocal about this imbalance. She pushed for higher pay, for recognition that their work was driving the show's ratings. Farrah, too, felt the sting of being underpaid, even as her face was plastered on every billboard and poster in the country. The disconnect between their fame and their compensation bred resentment that no amount of fame could smooth over. But here is where Kate Jackson's new admission reshapes the story. She says that the contract disputes, though real and painful, were not the heart of the matter. Farrah's restlessness wasn't just about money or career control. It was about something deeper, her sense of identity. Farrah didn't want to be trapped as Jill Monroe forever. She feared becoming a character instead of a person, a commodity instead of an artist. The turning point came when Farrah realized her career might actually shrink if she stayed. She confided to Kate that she worried about being typecast, that she would never get the serious roles she craved if she remained an angel. Jackson remembered the urgency in her voice, the sense that Farrah wasn't merely negotiating a contract, she was fighting for her future. And while the tabloids later painted her exit as a battle over money, Kate insists that was only the surface. The truth was far more personal. Jackson also revealed that she supported Farrah more than people knew. While the network was furious and the press portrayed Farrah as selfish, Kate quietly understood. She saw the late-night doubts, the exhaustion after endless shoots, the frustration when scripts reduced their characters to outfits and hair. For Jackson, Farrah's decision to leave wasn't betrayal, it was survival. That's the irony. The contracts that were supposed to secure the show ended up pushing its brightest star away. The clauses designed to hold the angels in place only reminded Farrah of the freedom she didn't have. And when she finally made her decision, it wasn't a calculated career move. It was an act of defiance against a system that refused to let her breathe. But if contracts and control weren't the whole story, what was? Kate Jackson now says there was another layer, one more intimate and painful, the toll it took on Farrah's personal life. And that, more than any salary dispute, was the real reason she walked away. By the spring of 1977, Farrah Fawcett was everywhere. On television, on magazine covers, in store windows, even taped to the walls of teenagers' bedrooms. To the outside world, she seemed untouchable. But inside the bubble of Charlie's Angels, the reality was far from glamorous. Kate Jackson has now admitted that the personal cost of that sudden fame was the real breaking point, and it was heavier than anyone outside the cast could see. The schedule itself was punishing. Episodes were shot back-to-back with almost no rest. each one requiring hours of preparation, rewrites, wardrobe fittings, and publicity events stacked on top of filming. Farrah, who had been newly married to Lee Majors just a few years earlier, found herself living a double life: actress by day, reluctant celebrity by night, and struggling wife in the hours left over. The long days on set left her with almost no time for her marriage, and when she did go home, she often carried the exhaustion with her. Kate Jackson remembered the quiet moments between takes, when Farrah's bright energy would dim. She wasn't complaining about money or scripts in those moments. She was talking about Lee, about how rarely they saw each other, how the show was swallowing her life whole. For Jackson, who had her own frustrations with the demands of the series, it was clear Farrah was being torn apart between career and marriage. The tension wasn't just about time. The industry's fixation on Farrah's image also became a private burden. Every photo shoot, every network demand, every sex symbol headline reduced her to a product that could be sold. Kate later admitted that Farrah longed to be taken seriously, to prove she had depth beyond her looks. But the more famous she became, the more she felt she was losing control of her own identity. It wasn't Jill Monroe she was playing anymore. It was Farrah Fawcett, a brand everyone else owned but her. By the end of that first season, the cracks in her marriage to Lee Majors were impossible to hide. He was building his own career momentum, often working on location, while she was chained to the set in Los Angeles. Their phone calls were short, their visits rare, and tabloids began circling like vultures, eager to predict the end of their marriage. Kate Jackson said she could see how deeply it hurt Farrah. What the world interpreted as ambition or ego was, in truth, a woman trying to hold on to her personal life while the machine of fame pulled it away piece by piece. There's a moment Kate Jackson has spoken about that crystallized this struggle. During a late-night break in filming, Farrah told her, "I can't keep living two lives. If I don't choose, I'm going to lose everything." That choice, Jackson now admits, was the heart of Farrah's decision. She wasn't abandoning the Angels, or her fans, or her career. She was trying to save herself, her marriage, her health, her identity. The cruel irony was that the very qualities that made Farrah irresistible to audiences, the smile, the hair, the glow, were the same qualities being drained from her by the relentless pace of the show. Fans saw perfection. Kate saw fatigue, loneliness, and doubt. The Angels might have been conquering television, but behind the curtain, Farrah was crumbling under the weight of her own success. And so the personal toll became the turning point. Money could be renegotiated, contracts could be challenged, but the strain on her marriage, the loss of her private self, and the fear of becoming a hollow version of who she once was, that couldn't be ignored. For Farrah, the cost of staying had become greater than the risk of leaving. Yet, Kate Jackson has revealed there was still one moment, one breaking point, when Farrah finally decided she couldn't go back to the set. And that moment, more than anything else, explains why she walked away for good. Every star has a breaking point, and for Farrah Fawcett, Kate Jackson says it arrived in the most ordinary of places: the weekly production meetings. These gatherings, held every Tuesday, were supposed to keep the show running smoothly. Scripts were discussed, schedules handed out, notes from producers delivered. But for the Angels, they became something else entirely. They were reminders of how little power they truly had. Kate Jackson admitted that Farrah dreaded those meetings. Every time, the network's executives and Aaron Spelling's team would dictate what was expected of the women: longer hours, more press appearances, tighter costumes, endless demands to keep up the show's glossy image. There was little space for their opinions, and certainly no room to say no. For Jackson, who had a reputation for being outspoken, these meetings were frustrating. For Farrah, they were unbearable. It was during one of these sessions, Jackson now reveals, that the decision was made in Farrah's mind. The producers were outlining yet another stretch of publicity tours layered on top of filming. Farrah listened quietly, then leaned over to Kate and whispered that she couldn't keep going. Not wouldn't, couldn't. That word stayed with Jackson. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't ego, it was desperation. In that moment, Farrah saw the future stretched out in front of her, years of the same exhausting cycle, her marriage dissolving, her chances at meaningful roles slipping away. Kate recalls that her friend's eyes filled with tears, not the tears of someone plotting a career move, but of someone realizing she was cornered. Walking away wasn't just an option, it was the only escape she could see. The aftermath was swift. Once Farrah made her choice, the producers fought back hard, lawsuits were threatened, networks panicked, and the press swarmed the story like sharks. Headlines screamed about betrayal, about a star too arrogant to stay loyal to the show that made her famous. But Kate Jackson has insisted, even now at 75, that those headlines missed the truth. Farrah didn't leave to chase money or stardom. She left because she had reached her breaking point as a woman, not just as an actress. Jackson remembers defending her friend privately, while the machine of Hollywood tried to spin another narrative. She knew Farrah wasn't abandoning the show out of selfishness. She was trying to reclaim control over her life. Every interview that painted her as difficult felt like a knife twist, because Kate had seen the exhaustion firsthand. She had heard the late-night confessions, the doubts about her marriage, the fear of losing herself entirely. The cost of that decision was brutal. Farrah's career in film had highs and lows, and her departure haunted her public image for years. Fans adored her, but the industry never fully forgave her for walking away at the height of her fame. And yet, Jackson now says, there was no other choice. The real betrayal would have been to stay and let herself be destroyed. That's the moment Kate Jackson admits changed everything. The Tuesday meetings weren't just business. They were the stage where Farrah finally realized the price of being an angel was too high. And once she saw that truth, there was no turning back. But leaving came with consequences that rippled far beyond Farrah's career. The show itself was shaken to its core, and the angels who remained were left to carry the weight of a legacy that could never quite be repaired. And decades later, Kate Jackson still insists that what came after tells us more about Farrah's courage than anything she did on screen. When Farrah Fawcett walked away after just one season of Charlie's Angels, the shockwaves were immediate. The networks scrambled to replace her, tabloids declared the show doomed, and fans were left stunned. In those first few weeks, it seemed like the Angels' wings might be clipped forever. Kate Jackson, who stayed behind with Jaclyn Smith, later admitted that the set felt emptier, even when a new angel arrived to fill the gap. Cheryl Ladd was brought in as Farrah's younger sister, Chris Monroe, and the show continued, even thriving in the ratings for a while. But as Kate reflected years later, something had changed. Farrah's absence was more than a missing face. It was a missing energy. The chemistry of the original trio could never truly be replicated. Audiences still tuned in, but Jackson confessed that she felt the show had lost its innocence, its spark, the fragile balance that had made it a phenomenon in the first place. The press, of course, turned Farrah's exit into a spectacle. Headlines painted her as reckless, arrogant, or ungrateful. The narrative was that she had bitten the hand that fed her, abandoning the very show that made her famous. For years, this shadow followed her career, even as she went on to prove her dramatic talent in roles like The Burning Bed, which earned her an Emmy nomination and silenced critics who once doubted her depth. But Kate Jackson has now admitted that the public never understood the truth. Farrah wasn't reckless. She was brave. She wasn't arrogant. She was terrified of being trapped in an identity that wasn't her own. And she wasn't ungrateful. She was desperate to save the parts of her life that still mattered. Jackson insists that her co-star's departure should never have been seen as betrayal, but as survival. The years that followed deepened Kate's perspective. She stayed with Charlie's Angels until 1979, battling her own frustrations with scripts that reduced her role and clashed with her ambitions. Looking back, she admits she envied Farrah's courage to leave when she did. Where Jackson pushed against the machine until she burned out, Farrah broke free early, even if it meant paying a price. What lingers most for Kate, even now at 75, is the way history tried to rewrite Farrah's story. Too often, the narrative became one of scandal and downfall, when in truth, it was one of resilience and choice. Kate Jackson says she will always remember her friend, not as the woman who abandoned Charlie's angels, but as the woman who dared to put herself first. In the decades since, the show has remained a pop culture landmark. Reruns continue to find new audiences, and the image of Farrah with her iconic hair and effortless smile endures. Yet Kate's words remind us that behind the icon was a woman making impossible decisions that shaped not only her career but her legacy. And perhaps the most poignant part of Jackson's admission is that she never judged her, even when the press tried to pit them against each other, even when fans asked her how she really felt. Kate defended Farrah in private. Their bond, tested by fame and separation, remained rooted in understanding. And that understanding, Jackson says, is what gives her peace now as she reflects on the truth. For nearly 5 decades, fans have speculated about why Farrah Fawcett left the show that made her a superstar. But Kate Jackson's words cut through the noise. It wasn't greed, it wasn't ego, it wasn't betrayal, it was survival. And in telling that story, Jackson believes fans can finally see Farrah not as the angel who walked away, but as the woman who fought to keep her wings intact. Kate Jackson has carried this story for almost half a century. To the world, Farrah Fawcett was the golden girl who seemed to throw away the role of a lifetime. But in Jackson's words, the truth was far more human. Farrah wasn't walking away from fame. She was walking toward herself. She was fighting for her marriage, her health, and her sense of identity in an industry that tried to strip all of it away. For Kate, the memory of those days remains bittersweet. She remembers the long hours, the endless photo shoots, the pressure that turned 3 women into symbols rather than people. She remembers the night Farrah whispered she couldn't keep going. And she remembers, too, the courage it took for her friend to step off the stage at the very moment the world demanded she stay. At 75, Kate Jackson admits that the story of Farrah's departure has never been told with honesty. It was never about betrayal. It was never about arrogance. It was about survival. And for Jackson, finally speaking those words is a way of honoring not just her co-star, but the woman behind the image, the friend who chose her own life over a machine that would have consumed her. For more emotional stories, check out this video.